This episode of Dispatches from Planet Albany is brought to you with support by New York State United Teachers, which represents more than 600,000 educators and school-related professionals in New York. Dispatches is also supported by the public affairs firm O'Donnell & Associates. For more information, check out o'donnellsolutions.com.
Whether it's Assemblywoman Lombardo, I'm sorry, you're David Lombardo. Lupardo is what I meant to say.
I've also declared war on potholes, so here's the first shot across the bow.
Well, as you know, with Planet Albany, there's always something that makes the planet turn.
And it's this amazing view of D.C., and Eddie Vedder comes out, and he goes, "You have a cigarette?" And I've never smoked in my life, but if I had, I wish that was the moment.
And this strategy takes us from potholes to knotholes.
I would like to say it was a pleasure, Mr. Kim. But I'm on the road.
I'm David Lombardo, and you're listening to Dispatches from Planet Albany, a podcast about power and politics in New York State government. On this episode, we're diving back into the state's marijuana program, which could be at a major inflection point as a result of new faces in the state legislature, a changing of the guard at the Office of Cannabis Management earlier this year, and legislation championed by union interests that could impact wages in the industry. For more on the substantive impact of the pending legislation, which would create a cannabis wage board, we spoke with lobbyist Katie Neer for the Capitol Press Room, which is scheduled to air next week. But right here, we'll talk about how the controversial bill moved at the 11th hour and much more. We'll pick up the conversation discussing what might shape the direction of the wage board if it takes effect. Do you see this wage board, if it was enacted, to essentially be something de facto in control of the unions?
Definitely. I mean, absolutely. To me, that's as a creature of Albany, right? I think any of us who looked at that bill just looked at the strategy of how it emerged when it popped up on the last day that you could do a bill intro to age the 3 days to pass, in the 11th hour. I mean, it's an explicit AFL seat, so you know exactly where that bill came from. You know exactly who drafted it.
While Democratic lawmakers lined up behind the bill, it seems like there is at least some reservations after the fact. And here's what we heard from Assemblymember Landon Days, who is probably one of the leading voices on marijuana in the legislature, but did not sponsor this bill, although he did vote for it.
The bill came very last minute.
Yeah.
I have some concerns about the bill. My understanding is that we will address that. I think that's one of those things where the governor is going to have some conversations around that bill. And I think that's one of those bills that's above my pay grade. So it's one of those things where we have to work. I clearly do want to make sure that we have good union paying jobs across our industries, but I also want to make sure that we protect our small and medium sized businesses at the same time. So I do believe that we will be coming to the table and have further discussions on that. But I do believe that's going to be led more by the second floor on the governor's side. And speaking with the AFL-CIO and RWDSU.
Is that how you see things playing out with this bill?
Well, first, let me just pump up any legislators listening to your show. Nothing is above your pay grade. Nothing. Right? Everyone's accountable for their votes. And you saw that, right? You saw Majority Leader Peoples-Stokes and you saw Senator Kruger, who have been sort of, the matriarchs, the leaders of a lot of cannabis legislation throughout the years here, vote no on that bill. And I thank them for their activist no vote on the way out. So yes, I think the industry's coalescing. Clearly the union didn't think or probably underestimated the cannabis industry here. It is new. There's a lot of fractions. There's a lot of trade groups. There's a lot of competing interests. And so it's not necessarily an organized business interest or industry here in New York yet. I think this bill is motivating them to communicate and organize and try to level up in their level of political engagement, sophistication, and advocacy. So they're pushing back against this bill. They're doing a lot of substantive work to try to give the governor's office data points on what a bill like this, if it got signed as is and went into effect, what it would mean for the industry, which is really consolidation. And I honestly think that's probably a goal of the union, whether they say that out loud or not. I think it's an intuitive goal. Their life is easier if they can have collective bargaining units and work with fewer employers to get better deals for their members. Right now,
which we saw in the home care space.
Exactly. You see it in, rinse and repeat, right? Like that's the labor strategy. And it's not necessarily about having more members. It's about making sure they've got good deals and good employment situations for the members that they do have. And so I think they're comfortable with a number of these small and mid-sized businesses in New York in the cannabis industry going out of business. And I think they're comfortable with huge layoffs. You can see that in the registered organization sector of the cannabis industry here in New York. 3 years ago, there was probably 1,600 plus people employed by a registered organization or one of those medical companies. Today, it's shy of 600 total. No one cares. Union doesn't care. They don't care, right? I think OCM is starting to care because they're starting to see that reflected in a shrinking and a dying medical program. I think consolidation is bad in this cannabis industry for a number of reasons, and it's the antithesis of the legislative intent of the MRTA. And to just sort of ignore all of those legislative goals that people fought for because the union wants an easier industry to organize and kind of be involved in, to me and my clients, we oppose that.
Well, with the time we have left, I want to pivot to another recurring issue in this space, and that has to do with cannabis beverages. In late July, the New York Post shined a spotlight on New York City stores that were selling drinks with THC, which is what we think of as the kind of active ingredient in marijuana to get you high, so to speak. Can you give listeners a reminder about what types of drinks can be sold where and what continues to be an issue that makes this beverage area seem like the wild, wild west 5 years after we legalized marijuana and a few years after the federal government passed its sort of expansive hemp bill?
It is the wild, wild west right now. That's an issue of enforcement and who is supposed to be doing what. So just at a high level here in New York, if you want a beverage that has more than 1 milligram of THC in it, you should be only able to get that in a dispensary.
And does that matter whether that THC comes from traditional marijuana or has been chemically derived from those hemp products, the way scientists are able to do?
Mm-hmm. So hemp-derived THC products today are federally legal. Many people would argue that's through a loophole in the federal law, in the Farm Bill, and the way they define hemp in that bill. And so products with hemp-derived THC, you can just go online and buy them, and they'll be delivered to your door. No one's going to check if you're 21 or not. No one's going to charge you the adult use cannabis tax, for example, on that product. And that is kind of that free-for-all thing, right? So if you go into a bodega down in New York City or gas station, even here, more likely than not, that retailer has a hemp retail license. They get that license from the Office of Cannabis Management. They are supposed to be selling products that comply with a cannabinoid hemp regulation that was also promulgated by the Office of Cannabis Management. That regulation caps those products at a 1 milligram THC per serving dosage. That's a potency cap in that reg. It is also on OCM to enforce that reg. There's thousands. I think there's over 3,000 hemp retailers in New York. That's an overwhelming enforcement project for OCM, who's still working on enforcing against the kind of in-your-face kind of smoke shop, illicit retail shop problem that is pretty prevalent. And they're also enforcing against their licensees, right, and trying to establish a culture of compliance. There's a lot of confusion here. There's a lot of products flying around. I think if you're a consumer, I would encourage you to just go to your dispensary and buy products that you know are legal and in the regulated adult use cannabis program. There's a lot of federal activity right now on the hemp bill and these hemp-derived THC products. So I think we'll have clarity soon. I know OCM is thinking about this. I know that the governor's office is thinking about this. I know the legislature is thinking about it. They've got a couple bills introduced that would address this.
What would the right response be? Is it just about the enforcement side of things? Because given the scope of this, as you pointed out, that means a lot of bodies doing a lot of legwork. Or is there something statutorily that would address this? Because it seems like the state has said to date, we believe we have a vested interest in keeping high THC potency drinks out of these retail shops and that they need to be in dispensaries. So if they are going to continue to emphasize that, I mean, is there a statutory response that cleans all this up?
I think so, yeah. And I think part of it's that anti-inversion bill that passed at the end of session. I think the governor should not delay in getting that bill called down and hopefully signing it. If it needs technical tweaks, go ahead and navigate that chapter amendment process. But I think signing that bill is an important part of that process. And I think it would help clarify and simplify messaging, whether it's FAQs, do's or don'ts, out of OCM to the broader hemp community too, about what they can and cannot do. I think SLA is an important part of this enforcement as well, because a lot of these licensees with hemp retail licenses also have licenses at the SLA side.
Oh, sure. So if it's a bodega that's selling malt beverages, maybe they also have these things. So if you're sending somebody from SLA, maybe you could check on a couple things while you're there.
Like, let's do an MOU, right, between these agencies. And that can all happen now. That's all kind of regulatory stuff. Legislatively, there's two bills that are pending. Senator Cooney carries them both. One would codify Part 116, which is the cannabinoid hemp regulation, and it would tweak those potency caps. So it would increase the potency cap on beverages from 1 milligram of hemp-derived THC to 5 milligrams of hemp-derived THC. I think that's a good bill. I think it's a great idea. It just depends what happens at the federal level. So if you just kind of table that one while we figure out what happens over here in Congress on this definition of hemp in the Farm Bill, there's another bill that Senator Cooney carries, which is a really big idea, and I hope more people jump in on it and talk about it in 2027. It would allow THC beverages up to 5 milligrams, regardless of if it's from marijuana or from hemp, be sold in liquor stores who go and get some sort of beverage endorsement or some additional license type. It's a give to liquor stores that I think is an important category for them. There's obviously a lot of logistics and nuance to figure out, like if it's adult use marijuana and it's now in a liquor store, can that liquor store use the same point of sale system it's using? Does it have to do track and trace like the marijuana companies are doing track and trace? What does that mean for the traceability system? How is it going to be taxed? Are those liquor stores equipped to kind of run two different tax systems at the point of sale? I think all of those logistical operational issues can be overcome. I think the policy idea is a big idea. I think it's a very good idea. I also think it starts to destigmatize THC consumption. And when you do it slowly, so just liquor stores, for example, and you do a low dose up to a 5 milligram, I think you start to educate consumers about consuming THC, especially in the beverage format. Like, people are not drinking. There's a huge cliff between, millennial and what's next, Gen Z. Huge cliff in their alcohol consumption. But they do consume, in a beverage format, THC. As a parent, I'm concerned about kind of their free-for-all right now on this hemp-derived THC stuff, this intoxicating hemp, you might hear it called. And I do think New York could take legislative action to crack down, tax it, enforce it, help OCM do their job.
Well, thinking about OCM, they've had their executive director in place for a couple of months now. John Kagia got confirmed by the Senate before departing Albany this year. What's your sense of the agency under his direction? Is it noticeably any different than past administrators?
Definitely.
In what way?
A lot more stakeholder engagement, a lot more openness to have big policy conversations or even nitty-gritty operational discussions around moving things from point A to point B. So the opaqueness that has existed in that agency is kind of clearing up a little bit, if you will. And, it's going to take him time. It's going to take that whole leadership team a lot of time, I think, to get their head around cleaning up the nuts and bolts of state operations. But I think they've got the right team in the right places at the right time, probably for the first time in 5 years. And that is exciting, I think, for the industry. It's exciting for people like me who spend all day trying to work with them and help clients get through the system. And I think there's still a lot of things to clean up, but overall, it's like a breath of fresh air to have him confirmed.
At the end of the day, it's a results-oriented business, and one of the things he can't do as director is make the governor look bad, or else he's going to be in need of a new job. So what are those big challenges that you think he needs to take on and be successful at, or what are the landmines maybe that he needs to avoid being, the third in a line of OCM executive directors who were shown the door before their terms ended?
It's tricky. It's a tricky balancing act. I think first and foremost is expectation management of the stakeholders and clear communication. So I think it's worth over communicating with your stakeholders, whether it's at these monthly CCB meetings or in some other kind of format or rhythm of what you're working on, what's in the pipeline. When you have a decision you're rolling out, what is, like, in a very clear way, what is that decision? And if, to the extent you can share some of the why of how you reached that decision, that's important. And then previewing a roadmap, if you will. It's something that happens in the private sector all the time, right? You've got this roadmap of projects or things or goals you're working on for the following year. I think OCM should, and John Kagia should roll out a roadmap, literally, whether it's December, January, whatever, right? And sort of identify these quarterly work streams that they're doing, because there's so much work that needs to get done in there. There's comprehensive regulatory reform on the adult use side of things that needs to be undertaken. There's massive log jams with those December applicant pools. You have thousands of people still.
December of what year?
December 2023.
Yeah. It's always a fun part to remind people.
Yeah. So there's still a lot of confusion and a lot of anxiety with those stakeholders and those queues. And I think that's one concrete example of, I forgot what month it was, but let's say 3-4 months ago in a board meeting, John gave a very long, very detailed PowerPoint presentation analyzing the supply in the state, and then ultimately ending that PowerPoint presentation by asking the board for authority for the OCM to work through the entire December 2023 cultivator queue and award licenses to everyone who's still in there and still eligible. That was like groundbreaking communication and decision making for those stakeholders. And it maybe only mattered for the 300 people in that queue, but things like that are game changing in changing the culture in the state, changing the attitude between the private sector and the public sector, building trust, building credibility, and ultimately establishing a mature market here that has all eyes on it. Like every other state looks at New York. Every other country that's in the cannabis game looks at New York. And it's because we have 20 million people here. But we only have 2.4 million unique cannabis consumers right now. So there's a lot of optimism, a lot of room for growth, and all eyes are on Executive Director John Kagia.
And what about the legislature? Because Crystal Peoples-Stokes is leaving the Assembly, which theoretically creates a vacuum in marijuana leadership in that House, although I don't know how engaged she's been on all these issues since getting the big prize, Marijuana Regulation Taxation Act, in 2021. You don't hear people talking about this on the campaign trail. It's not an issue that divides people in the sense that I'm pro this, I'm pro that, my opponent isn't the right way on XYZ cannabis issues. So do you have any sense about what the landscape is going to look like in 2027? Is there anything about some of these primary winners or the existing incumbents that makes you think so-and-so is going to be the person to carry the mantle on XYZ marijuana issue in 2027?
I think there's a growing bench of assembly members who care deeply about this industry and have really taken the time to sit down with stakeholders and study, if you will. One of them is Assemblyman Landon Deas. Sure. He comes from the industry. He knows so much already just from that hands-on experience from the private sector side. Mm-hmm. And so I think he can be a natural kind of thought leader on these issues for the Assembly. I also think Assemblyman Zuccaro has been doing that work and having those conversations, and he has a really thoughtful, substantive team that work for him. I also think Assemblywoman Cassay down in Long Island, these issues around hemp-derived THC products and kind of kids just ordering them from the internet and getting them delivered to their doorstep is a big issue in her district. I know I've talked to her staff about that at length, and I think it's a huge concern for her. So I think she's paying attention to this, and we are losing giants in the space, right? Whether it's Assemblywoman Lou Pardo or Majority Leader Peoples-Stokes, and of course Assemblyman Gottfried when we lost him, or whether it was Senator Savino when she moved on. We have really lost these institutional kind of legends on this file. And so it's on people like me and the other kind of lobbyists and creatures of Albany who work on cannabis to roll up our sleeves and start to do the retail lobbying to build that bench and establish these relationships.
What are you encountering when you talk to people who don't have the experience that someone like Landon Days brings to this? Is it just sort of misconceptions and or a lack of interest? I mean, what is the common response you get from people when you bring up these issues and XYZ policy solutions you might have?
A lot of times it's kind of glazed eyes or some version of exhaustion, right? I think that it sounds fun and breezy and easy to talk about weed. Like, how hard could it be to sell weed? It is hard. It is really complicated. It's complicated legally. It's complicated operationally. It's very complicated from a regulatory perspective. And there's a lot of different stakeholders. There's a lot of misinformation. There's a lot of confusion, right? So they hear a lot, whether it's from consumers who are confused or whether it's from business owners who are having a very hard time. And so I think there's a little bit of fatigue around these issues. And I think there's a general posture or sense from legislators that the cannabis law, the MRTA, is good, that it's good bones, that the noise and the issues fall on the executive, fall on the regulator, and that they don't want to move too quickly to change the bones of the law without understanding the issue and giving the market the room to kind of breathe and get up and running. And I think that's fair. I think that's a fair position for the legislature to have. I think at this point, we have enough empirical data to identify some real weaknesses in the law that are low-hanging fruit.
Well, we've been speaking with Katie Neer. She's of counsel with the lobbying firm Dickinson and Avella, and she's one of the people you should ask any marijuana questions to if you run into her. Katie, thanks so much for making the time. Really appreciate it.
Anytime. Thanks for having me.